Welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of Roll Off a Tangent. Today, I'm joined again by my co-hosts, Nikita Zuev and Robert Gibson. Today, we are going to examine another story by Robert A. Heinlein, and its name is They Built a Crooked House. Our story starts in a quaint little area of Hollywood, which all of America considers quite crazy, in a place called Lookout Mountain Avenue. It is a place of odd architecture, unabashed in its utter lack of convention and style one might have to twist oneself around to appreciate. It is appropriate that it is here where we find our protagonist, Quintus Teal, a graduate architect. As we settle into the story, we find Teal having an animated discussion with his friend Bailey. Teal explained to his long-suffering friend just how dull modern architecture is. He lamented the utter pro-attitude society has towards housing that kept him an unemployed architect. After much back and forth, a throwaway remark Bailey made about Teal's rent making as much sense to him as talking about the fourth dimension inspired Teal for a new kind of house. He then went on to browbeat Bailey into giving Teal the money Bailey had put aside for a new home for himself and his wife. And such is the nature of their friendship that Teal walked away that day with a signed check. Bailey quite naturally did not tell his wife. After the house was built, Teal drove up to the Baileys to show them their new home. Not even Teal could have anticipated what greeted them. The entire second floor onwards of the Baileys' new house had vanished. An even bigger shock awaits them when they rush into the house and ascend the stairs. Lo and behold, the second level is still there. Baffled and bewildered, the trio decided to climb to the roof, thinking about taking stock of their surroundings. As they passed the third floor and onto the fourth, they found themselves back on the ground floor where they had started. Searching for a way out, the trio found that each door from every room now led to another entirely unconnected room. They were now trapped in a house of endless loops. Teal, meanwhile, had figured out what had happened. The house he built was truly a structure of 4 dimensions, and he hypothesized that the earthquake they had the night before somehow pushed the house into the 4th dimension. It no longer obeys space and time laws in the 3-dimensional world. The house took them to some truly remarkable places. There was a window that showed them the cityscape of Manhattan on the other side of the continent. Yet another showed a world with a sun far too bright to be the familiar one that hung over Earth's skies. Before Teal could investigate this alien landscape, the house trembled and shook. An earthquake had struck again. Stricken by panic, the trio leapt out of the first window they saw, landing most awkwardly, one piled on top of the other. They found themselves in a desert somewhere. Earth? Who knew? Of the house, there was not a trace. As luck would have it, they found an old rancher driving in their direction, and they hitched a ride back to where they started. When they returned, they found the house gone. Quite unable to figure it out, Teal was nevertheless undaunted by this turn of events, and as we leave him, he was regaling Bailey with yet another great new revolutionary idea for a house. Well, this is a charming little story that I'm very excited to hear what my friends think today. And how about we start with you, Nikki?
Oh, me. Oh, hi, hello. Hi, guys. Yeah. And he built the Crooked House by Robert A. Heinlein. So last time we had a discussion about Heinlein. I was quite critical of his work, which I still feel I was justified in. But let's not bring up old wounds and open up closets with skeletons. and he built a crooked house is a fun story. It's a story that gets you excited in situations where most of the stories would just have you flipping to the next page. I think it has a really good sense of humor. I think it's the second humorous story that we have looked at on the podcast. First being, well, or third. It depends how you want to look at the twonky. To be fair, but there was also the Delegators, written by yours truly. That was quite humorous, right? And comparatively, I think what really sells the tale is the rule of repetitive humor. With Miss Bailey fainting all the time at perfect moments, or as she, or as she sort of nestles next to her husband and just says, "Those trees terrify me," which I found very funny for some reason. I think that was my favorite joke of all. Yeah, the plot itself is quite easy to manage, easy to understand once you let go of the concept of how impossible of everything going on therein. Right, if you don't know maths, then I think the impossibility of it is not as apparent. But if you've done a lot of mathematics in your day and age, you're like, that's not how fourth dimension works. Well, okay, whatever. Yeah, all right, okay, all right, okay, all right, cool. Yeah, fair enough. And as soon as you let go, oh man, it takes you on a wild ride. I also like the fact that Mr. Teal is an absolute maniac, because he was like, yeah, we survived this completely impossible situation. So the next crazy idea that I've got, right? Oh my god, man. Sometimes you need to quit while you're ahead, right? There's a Russian saying, which in its originality sounds, "Без бутылки не разберешься," which roughly translates to, "Without a bottle, there's no way we're gonna solve this." And that's how the protagonists of the story looked at this entire situation, as they drank at the beginning to get into the situation, and then they drank all the way through to get out of the house, which actually gives you the idea of, like, what if they are just all raging alcoholics and this is not happening at all, right? You could even take it that way if you really wanted to stretch your imagination. They do drink quite a lot. Even that's another great line. Even Miss Bailey's like, "Oh, I don't touch spirit." She said as she gulped on the drink. Ah, great stuff. Awesome. Yeah, I like the story. It was fun.
Awesome. And I can't wait to hear from Robert, actually, because Robert, you tutor math. Am I right?
Yes, not to this level though, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear what you have to say, Robert. I'm very curious.
Yeah. I fully agree about the humour in the story. Humour, incidentally, being something that Heinlein isn't really particularly known for, I don't think, although he's capable of it, as this story well shows. And for me, the actual funniest part of the story was not so much any of the dialogue as the implied irony of them suspecting that they were in an alien planet at the end, whereas in fact they were in Joshua Tree National Park, California.
Yeah,
So
you're right. That is pretty
even the
funny. Yeah.
national parks in California are pretty weird, because California is kind of the epitome of weirdness. That to me was a very nice touch. I'd forgotten it. It's the third time I've read the story and I'd forgotten that very nice touch at the end. So,
All right.
yeah.
Do you have anything more to say, Robert?
Not well. It's a pleasant story to read.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about that. I would give it, as far as doing what it sets out to do is concerned, I would give it 10 out of 10. I don't think there's any way of grading stories as to their scope. I tend to grade stories as to how well they achieve what they set out to do, and this one is perfect from that point of view.
Well, for my part, I thoroughly enjoyed the story. The humor part was I felt the same way about the humor in this within the story, just like my co-hosts think. But it is a little bit more to me than that, because this, I have to confess, when I first floated the idea of doing like a discussion about this story, I was a bit ambivalent, because it is a mathematical fiction, and it's not gonna grab everyone. So I don't know if the listeners out there, if you ever actually pick up the story, whether you enjoy it or not. I will first note that this is Heinlein did very well balancing the very mathematical side of it with the humor side of it. But I'm gonna have to note that this ground had been laid before, and this particular story is almost a direct sequel to another story written in, I think, 1880s by Edwin A. Abbot, and that the name of that story is Flatland, a romance of many dimensions. And you find almost the entire, not translated word for word, but it is almost a direct projection, because there is some satire in Flatland dealing with the class, the class society in, is it Victorian England or is it Edwardian England? I'm not quite sure. Victorian. And there was some satire about the way women are portrayed in that charming little story too. It's women are lines, and in a two-dimensional world, and if they face you, they become a point, and if you're not careful and walk into them, you get pierced right through.
Wow. I mean, we know that guy's life. From that point of view.
It's basically a satire about the way gender relationships were back in those days, and there's a little bit of that in this particular story as well, just because of the way Mrs. Bailey was written. And I'm gonna really nerd out today. Because to me, what was the most fascinating thing about the whole story was the concept of the multidimensional thing.
The tesseract.
Yes, that's right. So I really feel like going into Flatland and then describing it, but I'm not going to, because it might bore people. I'll be talking the whole time. So instead, what I'm going to do is, for those listening, unfortunately, you're not going to see this, but I made diagrams of what a tesseract looks like. And if you're not going to watch the podcast, you might miss out on this part. And it's very difficult to describe in words, unfortunately. So here goes. So first, we have, this is a cube. Yay. This is a tesseract. This was the very first plasticine and toothpick model that Teal built for his friend. And Bailey was like, no, you can't build this house. And then Teal said something about unfolding a tesseract. So a cube unfolded looks like this. A cube in 2-dimension unfolded looks like this. A tesseract looks like this. So the actual house that Teal built, I'm going to pull it out, is like this, with the with the ground floor like this, and then the second level like this, and the top 2 floors. Now I actually mapped out where they went, but this is the layout of the house. So the first part of the story, this is how they traveled. First, they went into the entrance. They went up to the second floor. They see the kitchen. They see the lounge. And then they went up to the master bedroom and then up to the study. But then got turned down to the entrance hall. And yada, yada, yada. And later on, Teal walks through the windows. And then he lands in front in the yard. And then he tried to go back to find his friends. And now they end up back in the house of endless loops. And that, I think, is it's very hard to visualize the scene unless you actually draw it out. And I think that is the brilliance of this little story, because actually the mathematics, the branch of mathematics that deal with this particular area is called linear algebra. And if you do linear algebra on, say, a two-dimensional rotation, let's say, we all know what a two-dimensional rotation looks like. You have a graph, and then you have a point, and then the point travels in an arc around that point. But when you do your linear algebra, you find you need to have an axis. You need to have 0, 0 in the matrix in order to do the algebra correctly. And what's that axis actually? You think about it. It's a line shooting into into infinity. So it is, even though the rotation happens in 2D space, you need a third dimensional axis in order for it to calculate properly. And then what you find when you push it up to an extra dimension into three-dimensional rotation, you need a fourth axis. It's shooting somewhere into this, I don't know where. But it works. It totally works. It's very strange. And that particular axis is described as a imaginary number, a complex number. It's the square root of -1, which you can't do. But when you put it into the equation, it totally does everything for you. Like all of our modern avionics, let's say, calculating the yaw and the u and the whatever, none of that would work without this strange fourth axis shooting into who God knows where. And I just found that really cool. Like the characterizations and stuff like that was it made the story easy to read, but I was more captured by the math behind it, and I totally rated 10 out of 10. Although I have to say that this ground had been tread before by Edwin A. Abbot with that recognition. Yeah. Okay, that's my spiel. I don't want to take up too much of the podcast.
I didn't have a problem visualizing it without a diagram, to be honest. I don't know what that says about me, or about the story, but I also don't think that you need math. You need to understand math. I think actually not understanding math would make the story better. Because then you would have less questions. But it is really neat, the equation you spoke about, how it basically governs the world today, because of its necessity and its need in so many fields. That is very fascinating.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about other mathematical science fiction. I can just think of one main example, apart from the one that XJ mentioned, Flatland, which really is early science fiction. So that's a good example. But also a short story by Arthur C. Clarke called The Wall of Darkness, which is takes place on a planet where there is a three-dimensional equivalent of a Mobius strip or Möbius strip in two dimensions. Well, the surface of a Möbius strip in two dimensions is something which has only one side, as you can easily make one of those things. But a three-dimensional one, which is what this planet, unfortunately for its inhabitants, is, means that you could risk your sanity really if you go from one hemisphere of the planet to the other. You'd sort of meet yourself going the other way. So they built a wall all around the planet, and that's the basis of the story, to shut out the awkward fact of this mathematical nature of the world. And
They walled up an entire world?
well, they walled off. They put a girdle, if you like, round the world, and they
Wow.
don't know why it's there. They don't know why it's there, but they find out because one person dedicates his life to building a stairway to get on top of the wall and seeing what's on the other side, and they find that there isn't another side. But anyway,
Spoilers.
it's a good story. This one reminded me of that one. The other point one could mention about fourth dimension is that Joe Stalin's saying that you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs would actually be disproved if you could get into the fourth dimension, because you could make an omelette without breaking eggs. You just extract the inside of the egg out through the fourth dimension and make an omelette with it. There'd be no problem in that case.
Actually, you can now, in the real world, without the fourth dimension, make an omelette without breaking eggs.
You mean like make a little hole in the egg and...
No, you don't even need to make a hole, all right? So what you do is, I'm not sure what it's called in English, centrifuge, like there's really big...
Centrifuge, yeah.
Right. So you got, you take six eggs, you really, squish them around in that thing for like half an hour, and you boil those eggs, and boom, you open the egg, it's scrambled egg inside.
Right. You do actually have to open the eggs in the end.
That's not quite.
But the omelet is already made, okay? It doesn't say you can't make an omelet without eating a few eggs.
That's a very nice interpretation, I would say. But what Robert was touching on is that a being of a higher dimension doesn't, because of the additional axis, could travel past things that would ordinarily bar creatures of a lower dimension. And
I think... Oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. Say what did you want to say?
I wanted to say that actually, fourth dimension is a really neat way to explain teleportation.
Oh, totally. It's not just that, right? Like, they have this trope in science fiction. I don't know where I first saw it, but ever since then it's very popularized. A piece of paper, you fold it, and then you put a pencil across, and I don't know, but that would totally work for a being of a higher dimension, because it literally works like that for them, and it wouldn't just be them just crossing over into another spot with like relatively zero time wasted and things like that, right? It's also because like as they travel through that dimension, their shape changes as well, and this is very well covered in Flatland, but I'm not going to go into it right now. There are That's like a
I
YouTube.
feel like we should have reviewed Flatland.
Oh,
The amount of
Flatland.
times you mentioned
Flatland is amazing. However, it's a novella. It's quite long. Yeah.
How long is it?
About
Double length, I think.
about
Is it novel?
100 plus pages, I think, at least.
Well, it's not that much.
Yeah, I mean it's a nice read. Won't be too long. It would just be longer than a short story. There there is actually a YouTube channel called The Lazy Engineer, which I'm gonna put down in the description below, which gives you a beautiful, very simple, beautiful explanation of things in the fourth dimension, with great illustrations and animation and all that. Yeah, it also comes with Russian subtitles.
Me as a non-native speaker would surely enjoy that.
Yeah, I'll be like, wow, Russian subtitles. Too bad I don't understand a single word.
You put on the Russian subtitles just because you could.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Actually, come to think of it, I don't even know if it's Russian. It could be.
That's true.
It could be any of the Slavic languages, to be honest. Yeah. Yeah.
Now we know.
Yeah. I think. But just going back to discussing the short story as a well written piece. And just like going away from the mathematics side, like what really made it work is that balance of humor and characterization with a very difficult mathematical concept. And I think like Teal is a really awesome maniacal creature, just like Nikki said. It's like this unsinkable rubber ducky. Like nothing gets him down. He keeps coming back with his wild ideas. And Bailey and Mrs. Bailey are like the perfect counterpart to that, because they're much more down to earth. And I don't think the story would have worked quite as well without Bailey and Mrs. Bailey acting as foils to Teal.
Sure. It is interesting because we have not just one straight man, but two straight men in this comedy. And I mean the trope, not gender and sexual orientation of individuals. I mean the comic representation of the straight man, aka people who are acting normal in a bizarre situation. Right? We've got Miss Bailey and Mr. Bailey, both acting as these agents of law in this completely chaotic situation. Right. So it's very fun to watch them slowly lose it. Like one of the lines where Mr. Bailey is like, like, I know it's not your fault, Teal. I'm sure you didn't, you didn't mean this, but things are about to get, heated if you don't get us out of here. There's this just like at the end of Delegators, it's interesting that Mr. Heinlein also decided to have quite a morbid ending, if you really think about it. Because if they didn't jump during that second earthquake into that field, into that national park, they'd all be trapped in the fourth dimension. They'd never get out. The house was gone when they came back. Right? It's kind of morbid.
Yeah. I would say that anything that encourages people to think about dimensions is a good thing. I think
Good thing.
If people had thought more about dimensions in the age of the Reformation, it might have saved lives, because quarrels between, I don't know, Calvinists and Catholics about predestination and so on would be resolved if you just thought about transcendence in terms of a higher dimension, and then you wouldn't get stuck with apparent paradoxes. They'd be resolved theological.
Right, but one of the reasons why progress was so slow in those days was because church and a lot of such institutions were profiting from the fact that there were these squabbles. Right, they actively fought science in order to stop such thoughts getting out to the people. Right, so it's almost like it's no wonder that it took so long, because there was so much repression against scientific discovery, veiled as fight against dark magic.
Mathematics, though, is kind of the odd one out of the sciences, isn't it? It's sort of half science and half philosophy, I would say. Would you say logic was a science? I wouldn't really. It's
No.
it's more reflective, isn't it? It's not so much dependent upon observation as science.
I would say logic is let's put it this way, is a test of survival. If you don't have logic, you're not getting very far.
I think what ROAT means is the academic branch of logic, which doesn't necessarily.
I know. I was making a jape.
Okay, fair enough. I'm playing straight, I'm Bailey.
You're the straight man. I feel like, to be honest, of this podcast, if we had to, you could be either Mr. Bailey or Miss Bailey, either or Robert next to you. I feel like I'm Mr. Teal every time. I'm just running around here with my crazy ideas and theories. Trying to counterweight your very lawful ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but where were we? I feel like we have
science and philosophy.
Science and philosophy. Well, yeah, I mean, there is a I mean, science is actually very much rooted in philosophy as well. Like one of its biggest assumptions is that we can actually measure and observe things and arrive at the truth. And the question is, what if you can't observe and measure stuff? Then how do you arrive at the truth? And the example I would use is, we all know that the universe is slowly inflating, and then things are being pushed further and further apart. And it's being pushed further and further apart at a rate that is slightly faster than the speed of light. And what if one day the stars get pushed all the way out where they can no longer reach us, because the inflation is faster than the speed of light? Then logically it stands that the light will never travel to us. So then how do we know that there are stars, that we are in a universe? Like the people a billion years in the future would be conjecturing about the possibility of the stars, but they would have no way to experimentally verify it.
That's
go
on. I don't get a straight answer from books about, which is at the actual size of the known universe. It doesn't. It's very hard to get some answers about that, because as you say, XJ, the expansion of the universe, which has actually been made even more drastic by the recent discovery that the expansion is actually accelerating instead of, as you might think, decelerating because of the pull of gravity. It's actually accelerating, and they just invent this term called dark energy to explain its acceleration, which seems like a sort of fudge factor to me. But anyway.
Oh, I mean, come on, like the complex number thing to calculate the fourth dimension in linear algebra. That's like a fudge thing too. When I was looking into it, I was just like thinking, like, these mathematicians, they're like, no matter how we put these numbers around, we just can't get an answer. I know. What if we have this fake number? And it kind of works. Okay. That's what it felt like to me.
Well, saying that a variable is unverifiable is different than inventing a variable that doesn't exist, right?
Actually, that's literally what happened. There's a Wikipedia page on the guy that invented the mathematics to deal with rotation. I can't remember his name, but he was walking on a bridge, and the idea literally hit his mind.
Right. But it was because there was something unexplainable in the calculations, or
What do you mean?
what was the reasoning for him creating this? It wasn't just like, oh, let's have fun. It must have been there is something unexplainable within my calculations, or our calculations.
Well, I can't quite recall what the Wikipedia story is. I don't know if it ever covered, so I would have to reread the entry. But it's like the slotting the complex number into the linear algebra solved almost everything. Not everything, but it solved almost everything.
Yeah, so this concept actually is not that new. So when you have an unexplainable variable, a lot of times you create something that doesn't rightly exist. Let's put it this way. But you replace the unexplainable variable with something more concrete, and then things start to fall into place. It sounds like that's what has happened, but I'm not familiar with it. I have to read it.
It's a procedural thing, isn't it? It's they call the square root of -1 an operator. It's not exactly a number in the normal sense. It's an operator.
Yeah. Square root equals minus the square root of -1. Actually, you can't do that operation. You can't arrive at an actual number. And when I was doing linear algebra, like that axis is never solved, basically. Like the answer is always 2x minus something or the other. Well, I mean, I can't quite remember. My linear algebra is very, very rusty. But I can say it totally works. That's the freaky thing about it. It works.
It's reminds me of an old proverb that speaks of like a determined warrior is someone who can fight his enemy staring directly into their eyes, but a master tactician doesn't even face his opponent, because facing the opponent is already overthinking it. Just doing something sometimes is much much more beneficial rather than actually thinking it through too much. So there is this type of diving. I forget the exact name, but basically, if they think too much before the jump, they are for sure gonna break a leg or something. But if they don't think about the jump, if they just follow the procedure without thinking, there is a 85% chance that nothing bad will happen. And it's crazy. Scientists can't explain it, but it's just the way it is, right? Like some things are like that. So to me, it just sounds like they're like, just don't think about it. Just keep doing the equation. Like, well, I guess it worked. We just ignored this part.
I'm sure people like the lazy engineer, the guy whose YouTube channel I am going to put down the description into, would have an explanation for us. But I, living on a lower dimension than that, is perfectly happy that things work the way they do.
That's right. You got me thinking. I think in billions of years, people are going to create conspiracy theories. Although there's going to be all this documentation about stars, they're going to create conspiracy theories about all these videos are fake, all of these documents are fake. You can't see it, therefore it doesn't exist. So the sky was always black. That's what's going to happen.
Bro. You think about it. If you are a being in the fourth dimension, you could be a god, right? You could just just
okay.
appear here and there. And so a lot of what if there really are fourth dimensional beings that are sentient? Like all
because
literally all of our stories about ghosts and spirits and whatever could be explained by that, you know? Right? Is a presence out of nowhere talking to you, appearing from here and then there, and then taking on strange forms, transformation, totally weird shit. That could just be a being of fourth dimension passing through the third dimension.
Or like my explanation, they were all simply drunk in the build of Crooked House and all of those instances that you've just mentioned.
That could
Robert,
that
what were you
could
going to say?
Yeah, if we were invaded by beings, by four-dimensional beings, our only hope would be to try and form an alliance with five-dimensional beings. Take them in the rear.
Which, I mean, if the fourth dimensional beings exist, fifth dimensional peoples are basically across the, across the pond. It's not that hard to get to them, and then.
Yeah, totally, right?
You'd have to go to California and have a look.
To that national park, yeah. Climb those trees.
Actually, one of the things I found really charming about the story is how it disses Californians.
Why?
I mean, it's just fun, right? It's just like, oh man, these Californians, they're just weird. And then the Californians are like, no, we understand, but it's really the lost people in Los Angeles. And then the Los Angeles people are like,
Oh, you mean the beginning? Yeah.
It's actually the guys in Hollywood.
Right, and Hollywood just doesn't care.
Yeah, we're weird. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beginning to the story. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, when you mentioned to me that was a mathematical story and it began like that, I thought it was going to be like an essay form. And he began with rambling how much he hates California. I thought that was just like his introduction. It was like, hello, my name is Robert E. Heinlein and I hate California. Anyway, math. That's what I thought where it was going.
He's from Missouri, is Heinlein. So.
Oh, well, that explains everything. I have no idea. If you gave me a map of the USA and said, "Show me Missouri," I'd be like, "I know where Texas is." I don't really know their what's it called, the where the states are. Some, let's put it that way. I don't know where every single one is. Question. You spoke about fourth dimension and how things can be explained. A lot of people who experience what are they called, psychedelics or whatever, they talk about seeing things that do not exist out of space. Is it possible that somehow they are unlocking something in their brain to see something akin to the fourth dimension, right? Or is it a trick of the mind?
Well, what about, you perhaps don't need psychedelics. What about dreams? I mean, they can be quite like news from somewhere we've never heard of. They can be totally irrelevant to one's own life.
Oh man, I really hope my dreams aren't true.
Well,
Wow,
it's
dark.
not explicable.
I either have really strange dreams or nightmares. So if that what's it called? I could count on my hand like 3 times when I had good dreams in my life. Every other one has just been a disaster that I remember.
Oh man.
There's some dreams are personal. I have a recurring guilt dream that I'm about to sit an exam and I haven't done any work for it, and I don't know anything about the subject.
Well, that's almost endearing, I would say.
Yeah.
Like,
but most
yeah.
of them aren't like that. Most of them are just totally irrelevant to me personally. So I think it might be that one is plugging into a network, that one's mind is plugging into a network of a crisscross network of thoughts that are bouncing around through the universe. And sometimes you actually tune in on one of these thought waves or whatever in your dream, but it's nothing to do with you really.
Yeah, for sure.
like
Yeah,
That's
radio.
possible.
yeah. It's like if beings in the fourth dimension could cross space and time physically, there's no reason why that I can think of why their thoughts wouldn't be licking down to us or something like that through dreams and
Hmm.
stuff. And it's all very fascinating to uh, to speculate on. And I want to touch on what Nikki just said about what if about psychedelics and stuff like that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that Flatland really went into is how difficult it is for a being of a lower dimension to visualize uh, what the higher dimension is like. And it's like I find that to be true for us. We have a great deal of difficulty visualizing. I have a great deal of difficulty visualizing what the fourth dimension looks like. We can describe it in mathematics, and we can kind of make animations or stuff like that to sort of show what it is like as it's traveling through that dimension. But to fully appreciate the fourth dimension would be very difficult for us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think accessibility is the key, that the lower dimension is always accessible to the higher dimension, but not the other way around. So
exactly. Yeah.
anywhere on the fourth dimension, anywhere on the second dimension, a third dimensional being can touch anywhere he likes, whereas a second dimensional being couldn't cross a circle to find out what's inside it. Similarly, we can't break into a sphere to find out what's inside it without going through the fourth dimension
Mm-hmm.
and so on. So to the fourth dimensional beings, we're all laid out, as it were, flat, and we can be touched at any point. There's
Mm-hmm.
no way you can enclose something in the three dimensions to make it inaccessible to the fourth dimension, and so on up the scale. So 63rd dimensional people are really vulnerable to 64th dimensional
Yeah. Yeah.
people, and so on.
And one of the other things that Flatland did try to explore was when a circle was uplifted into the third dimension. It totally blew his mind. Like he went back to the second dimension, and he was basically pariah. Oh wait, was it a circle or was it a square?
I don't know.
The
Never read it.
circles were the most prestigious
Hmm.
shapes in Flatland, weren't they? I mean,
Yeah.
the philosophers and so on were all circles.
I think it was a square. I think it was a square that
Mm,
got uplifted. And it's kind of funny when you think about it, because the way they describe, which I never thought of, quite frankly, is that a circle is basically a polygon with too many sides to count.
yeah, infinite number of sides. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why they were so prestigious, because you could look at a circle from any angle, and in Flatland it looks, it looks in cross section the same length. So
Yeah.
that impressed them enormously. They thought, wow, these circles, they're so good.
That there is a great deal of satire in Flatland, and I would
Mm.
really encourage all the listeners out there to give it a try if you have the time, because um when I read that section, I just keep I the thing that I cannot dislodge from my mind is that the circles are just really fat. They put on too much fat, and so they bloat out and become circles.
Mm. Yeah, that reminds me actually that there's a good science fiction novel, much more recent than it's 1970s, I think, called Dragon's Egg by R.L. Forward, and most of it is set on the surface of a neutron star where the gravity is about 67 million times as strong as it is on Earth, and therefore, although it's not actually strictly speaking two-dimensional. It might as well be, because movement in the third dimension is virtually impossible for the inhabitants of this neutron star. They
Hmm.
to them, two dimensions is virtually all that there is. It's a great book.
So
Okay.
they're all flat. They're
Well,
flattened by
they're
the
sort of
gravity.
like little tiny centipedes, if you like, very low
Uh,
slung in the body. I'll write the name of the book.
I think this has been our longest tangent of all time.
I mean, yeah. I don't know.
So
I
and he built a crooked house. In that story, there's one moment which I think is very fascinating. And rather than thinking about theories of what other things mean, I think we should return to the story and think of this. In one of the windows in the office, they look. All three others show us the outside world. Even the place that they think is an alien planet is then revealed to be California, which might as well be an alien planet. For me. There is one space, though, which is just nothing. What's that nothing? What is this about? What is Heinlein trying to say? Why is there not? And even he because we want more description. He says, what do you mean? There's nothing. There's nothing. What color is nothing? Nothing. That's the way he talks about it, almost dismissively. So the question is why? What was the point of showing this place?
It's hyperspace.
I'm pretty sure that was a window, so to speak, into the fourth dimension. Yeah.
So because the protagonist looked at it and saw nothing, you mean to say that they couldn't comprehend it? That's why they saw
Yeah.
just emptiness. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in Flatland, there was that uplifting moment when the square came up into the third dimension and he could see the spheres and stuff like that. And Edwin A. Abbot could describe that because he is a third dimensional creature. But for us, how are we going to describe the fourth dimension? Except through mathematics. So I think that particular window, well, I'm not Robert A. Heinlein, so I don't know. Maybe he just like slapped it out of nowhere. But to me, that was an attempt at describing the fourth dimension. And
Well, an attempt at not describing the fourth dimension because it says nothing.
I mean, it would like I said, if we go into the fourth dimension, it would make no sense to us.
Yeah.
Right. But I think with something, I think seeing nothing is kind of a cop out.
That I mean I don't know. It's very hard. It really is very hard to describe four-dimensional shapes. So cop out maybe. I would probably take the same route myself, to be honest, if I were writing the story. Yeah, call me that if you want. It's but I think the charm of stories like this is that it lets us speculate on things.
Yeah.
So I think like going off on big tangents, when we're discussing stories like this, when it's like exploring like some really wild ideas, like literally the frontier of science kind of thing, I think it's totally cool. I wouldn't say it's legitimate, but I think it's cool.
So we know how XJ would approach describing the fourth dimension. Do you have a better idea, Robert? Or would you also cop out?
I'd maybe talk about shifting forms and forms that sort of melt into each other or overlap each other in a confusing sort of way. If I didn't want to just say I couldn't see anything, or maybe I'd say that, like in the Larry Niven stories, some of them anyway, and Tales from Known Space, that if you look out of a window into the fourth dimension, the sides of the window come together because you're not allowed to see in the fourth dimension. So you see the sides of the window next to each other, if you see what I mean. Which in itself is weird, of course.
For sure. Now, I think it would be incorrect of me to point out that someone's lazy and not attempt myself, right? Otherwise, I'm just saying like, you're lazy and so am I. Anyway, let's go have a drink. So, I think the way I would try to describe it, so I would put us in the head of the protagonist for those moments that they saw the fourth dimension, and I would talk about how the more their mind tried to make sense of what was going on, the more things stretched further away from the reality that they couldn't understand, because they looked at a circle and it clearly looked like a square, right? And I would begin from that point of view. I think that shouldn't have any angles whatsoever had them, and the idea that everything that should have been small began to outstretch and move about and in strange surfaces. And in this moment, when he would relax his vision before focusing it again, there were those split seconds where he thought he can finally make out what things look like. But then the more he began to focus again, with these inconsistencies start melding his mind, I'd probably have them go insane at some point. Because if you keep looking at something and it just doesn't make any sense, I think it's the equivalent of someone with epilepsy just having strobing lights in their face for an hour. I think if you had to be submitted to such torture, I don't think you would be sane anymore. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
And is there anything else I want to say about the story? Well, I definitely liked it better than the previous one. What was the name of the previous one? By Robert A. Heinlein.
For me, it was the other way around. Although I'm not saying
I think
it was totally perfect. It's just that the scope of the other one is more kind of, well, it's more not exactly creepy, but I don't know.
It's really, the concept is really cool. I must agree with you, but I think the execution of this story is way better than the execution of the previous. What is the name of it?
They.
They. Thank you. They. That's right. I think they had a really grand concept, but it didn't quite stick the landing for me, as I said in the previous thing. And this, the concept is much smaller, but it passed with flying colors. So for me, something that is of smaller scope, but way better and way more interesting.
I totally disagree with you on that. The concept in this particular story is much bigger than they. Much bigger.
Well, no, I'm talking about personal interrelationships of characters. I'm not talking about the scope of, and there's going to be a huge war. I'm talking about the scope of, remember, you are the person who likes visuals. I like people, right? So for me, the scope in they is about an individual and their personal struggle. And for me, that's way grander of a scope to tackle. The philosophy of being trapped in a fake world is really fascinating to me, right? Where here, the characters could have been replaced by anybody else. They are not that important to the story. The concept of the mathematical situation is, but they are, they could be anybody else.
I think my take on this is that it's a very well executed if I was a mathematics teacher trying to describe linear algebra to a class and not put them to sleep, this would have been the best way to do it, because there's equal amounts of humor and there's equal amounts of characterization within the people involved, and there's some dynamism to the way they interact with each other. In short, it is entertaining, and it is probably the best way to put a mathematical concept or a scientific concept that would usually be very dull and very difficult to work through. to people. So to me, it's very well executed on those grounds. Just like Flatland was. I wouldn't say it was easy to work through the concepts, but the way the story was structured gave me a very a much better understanding of is it Euclidean or is it Euclidean? I'm sorry.
Euclidean.
Euclidean mathematics. Yeah. So 10 out of 10 for this story from me.
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Second
It's
10
really
out of
good.
10
Yeah.
in a row.
In a few more episodes, I would be like 11 out of 10 and 12 out of 10, just like Robert.
If you start that, I'm just gonna say let's just abandon numbers because they mean fucking nothing. If if that's how we treat math, get me out of here.
Well, because my teachers weren't as entertaining, so my maths are all down the drain. 12 out of 10.
Well, that's all right. 12 out of 10 is 1.2, isn't it?
That's exactly right.
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. Cool. All right, Robert. What's you already gave a score, right? 10 out of 10 or 12 out of 10?
Stick to what I said. Yes, 10 out of 10. Simply
Yeah.
because it couldn't be improved as far as its own intentions are concerned.
I don't think so.
Sure. I mean, just to go back to your point about describing the fourth dimension, I guess that might be your sticking point. Like for me,
that's one of them for sure.
One of them.
I think the other. So while I really enjoyed the humor of the entire story itself, I think that's what makes the story 8 out of 10. If there wasn't this humor, it would be much lower. There is a certain verisimilitude that is lost on the characters, especially at the end of the tale when they come back and they see that the house is gone, and they're like, well, whatever, let's get in the car and go. Like, they don't even contemplate that they were seconds away from being trapped in an impossible, never to be seen again prison. So I think being a little bit more, either a little bit more morbid at the end, or having the house just be broken down into pieces because it just couldn't handle the earthquakes, instead of going to the floor. You gotta choose. You gotta park your lane in that situation, right? Because you either make overt points of how morbid it is, or so you acknowledge that your comedy is quite dark, or you don't. And I think that there should have been just a little bit more acknowledgement, maybe at least from the author, to us.
I think they were kind of punch drunk by that time. I don't think they.
That's also true. Yeah.
They weren't capable of realizing how close they'd come to total disaster. I think.
Yeah. Okay. That I can buy that. However, I don't think it took them like a couple of hours to get from the forest, right? Wasn't it the next day that they were? I can't remember.
It did take them quite a bit of time, but it was never specified how much.
That's true.
However,
okay, I can buy that theory.
Okay, so they are punch drunk for hours. Who knows, man? The fourth dimension probably screwed up their the alcohol in their system or something. Yeah,
that's true.
Who knows?
That's possible.
Who knows? However, last word from me, because we're past an hour actually.
Ooh.
Last word from me is that for me, if I were to try to describe the fourth dimension in this particular story, my particular choice would have been to stick to being as mathematically close as I can, and if I can't, then I would just use nothingness. That would have been my take, because this story is very much rooted in an actual concept. And
when I sorry, I thought you were finished. My bad.
well, and just personally for me, I would want to respect that concept. And if I can't bring justice to it, I would avoid it.
This is what I do as an author. I have a substantial amount of connections with individuals of many fields. So if I really wanted to describe something like the fourth dimension, like I gave you an off-the-cuff situation, but actually what I would first do is go to a person who I know is a mathematician, and I would say to them, look, if you just had to guess, what would the fourth dimension look like? And then I'd go to another guy and ask the same, or another girl, whatever, another person. I think that's what an author has to do. They have to, if they really want to write about a high concept, they have to reach outside of their current grasp and try and get that. So maybe going and like if at the end of this process that I just described, all of the mathematicians tell me you're insane, there's no way we could describe this to you, then I would be like, I'm satisfied, I'm doing what XJ said, we're saying nothing. But until that research is thoroughly done, I'm gonna be trying to find out more than, because I think nothing is just boring. Like I can read a lot of other stories that don't involve the fourth dimension to find out what the fourth dimension not look like. But this is the one story where we are mentioning the fourth dimension, so why not try?
Okay, Robert, any last words?
I think the idea of nothing depends on how boring it is, depends on what's on either side of it. You can have a few seconds of looking at nothing and it can be really creepy,
True.
So I wouldn't say it's boring, but I get what Nicky means about it. There might have been an opportunity lost there.
I mean, if this was a horror short story, and Heinlein went on describing how Teal looked into nothingness and realized that he wanted to see something, but there was simply nothing, right? And describing the dread of someone witnessing that there's no colors, there's nothing he could describe, even to himself. Okay, cool, awesome. That's a properly used situation. But here it's played for a laugh, I guess. I'm not really sure.
Not a laugh, I don't think. No. All right. Well, perhaps instead of giving it 10 out of 10, I'd give it 9.99 out of 10.
Ladies and gentlemen, and this is how we get there. Bit by bit, we're going to get from this ridiculous 10 out of 10 all the time, and we're going to have actual rates, actual scores that make sense.
Well, it's still 10 out of 10 for me. And with that note...
You've previously given different numbers, right? That's what I'm saying.
To be fair to Robert, he's given different numbers too.
Well, he's like, this story gets 10 out of 10 for trying, and then like 0 out of 10 because it's shit.
No, I think Robert actually really did give a very low score to Hemingway.
Well, that's the example. I didn't want to look. I already have people following me on the street, which are clearly Hemingway fans. So I just didn't want to bring it up. But yes, Hemingway sucks. There you go. You got me.
For execution, but 0 out of 10 for aim, perhaps.
That's right. And so let me translate this to human language. 10 out of 10 for trying, 0 because it's shit. There you go.
Well, no, it's not quite the same thing. 10 out of 10 for technical ability, but 0 out of 10 for
pointlessness.
Pointless, to show it's pointless. Yeah.
Okay, and on that note, I guess we can end the podcast unless we have last PSS words.
Read the story; it's fun.
Totally.
And he built them cookie crafts. There you go. That's it.
All right. Well then, I guess we can end this podcast. Good day to everyone. Good night to everyone, wherever your time zone is, and take care of yourself. Like and subscribe if you actually find it entertaining.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.